Hey, Tommy.
Hola.
Oh, hello. They're saying hello, but you can't hear them.
Morning.
I can't,
Hello,
yeah.
everyone.
So we can't see you in the room. If anyone does have questions and stuff, they'll just have to be like, hello.
I'll have a mic to use.
What?
Oh, I understand because you don't have us on TV.
Yeah. They just wanted the presentation up.
How rude.
I know.
You're so pretty.
Well, I can see that you're talking. A little thing pops up and says that Sid L3 is talking.
Yay. I can see Claire Bear.
Anyone in Zoom can see you, but in the room we can't see you.
You can do the manual click.
Okay. Well, I'll hang around and yeah, when it
Okay.
starts, I think it's due to start at 12.
Actually, can you ask someone in the room who's a delegate that I can appoint to look after the mic?
Who's aware?
Who's someone I could appoint to look after the microphone? Can you ask
Oh,
someone?
in Sydney?
Yeah.
Mm,
A responsible person linked to this event.
I would check.
Thank you.
Apparently, Sydney is just finding out now that they're invited.
Okay.
It's in old ETA. Maybe Charlotte.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to repost all of the things everywhere so that everyone knows. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. First person in, be like, here you go.
Yeah, no, I'll do it. I'll try Charlotte first, and otherwise I'll just look at someone who looks responsible.
Yeah. Good
Okay.
pick. Thanks, Tommy.
Bye.
Bye.
definitely unmuted because we'll see them in the room waving their hands.
Okay.
Wait,
I can definitely hear you.
damn it. I wanted you to wave your hands though.
Oh, but hey, wave your hand. There you go.
Yay, there we go. Just showing Charlotte how to use the mic.
Fabulous.
Thanks. Hey.
I did, I think. But there's a little like message on the laptop.
Is that okay? Just want to make sure if we want to use this one.
Yeah. Beautiful. And can we record as well? Thanks. Okay, beautiful. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. It's so exciting. So happy World Product Day. It's the first ever product day in the history of product days of the world. And so actually Canberra's the first product meetup to be hosted on this day. So I'm going to go through, but essentially there are 90 cities across the world who are hosting meetups today under the Product Tank banner across 43 countries, which is pretty exciting. So 20 hours of product awesomeness. You can go to worldproductday.com, I'm pretty sure is the URL, and actually watch some of the live streams of London and some of the other cities as well. So lots of product awesomeness to consume. So before we start, I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of a history of Product Tank, very high level. So 8 years ago, product was kind of very lonely. There was not really a whole lot of community base around product management. And so in London, Product Tank was started, and it was started by a group of people meeting up in a pub just to talk about all things product and share knowledge and experience. From there, they kicked off Mind the Product, which is a big sort of community around around product management. There's sort of training events and conferences and a whole lot of great things like blogging and stuff that comes from that. So check that out as well. And 8 years later, product management is no longer very lonely because it's kind of across 140 odd cities across the world. So there's lots of product community happening. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the size of it. So across 150 cities, we have over 150,000 people who kind of are part of this community. And you can go check it out at mindtheproduct.com/product tank. 25,000 people subscribe to the newsletter that comes out. So if you haven't already subscribed to it, jump on and get it. It's called Prioritized, how appropriate. And it's just got lots of great little insights. There's also a Slack channel that is around around Product Tank. So if you jump on Mind the Product, become part of that community, there's 15,000 people on that channel as well. And then there's a conference that's held every year in London and San Francisco, and they have 4,000 people kind of attend those, and they're 2 days of just awesomeness around product and sort of training events and things like that. And we've also got the largest product management blog. So if you haven't registered for that either, just jump on mindtheproduct.com and check it out. So this is our little Mind the Product thing. So the tribe, this is your tribe. You're part of this bigger community. You know, we're trying to kind of build the community in Canberra, but also remembering that we're part of a much bigger community around the world. And so, you know, join the conversation, learn from each other, share your knowledge and experience, because we can all help each other learn and grow in this space. And so this is the 8th anniversary of Product Tank, and as a result, World Product Day has been born. And so, you know, like I said, 90 cities across the world, 43 countries and 20 time zones that will be actually hosting meetups today. So we're really big on social media and tweeting and all that kind of stuff. So if you're kind of doing that as well along this journey, please make some noise. Use the hashtags World Product Day, hashtag Product Tank, and as well as I think hashtag DTA chats. So thank you to the DTA for hosting today's meetup. And so we're, like I said, we're the first meetup to be kicking off today, but in 3 hours, New Zealand will be kicking off with Wellington and Auckland, and then it just goes on and on and on for the rest of the day. So welcome, let's start. So today's event is about unlocking your product's potential. So how do you do that? By understanding all of your users, and we have 2 really awesome speakers today. We have, I'll just mention our global sponsor and our local sponsor. So Amplitude are sort of Product Tank global sponsors. They support us with a whole lot of stuff worldwide, and our local sponsor for this event is the Digital Transformation Agency. And so our speakers for today are Bree Norton. Bree is an accessibility and inclusivity lead, and she'll be talking about how you shift to the left and realize the benefits. So how do you actually bring accessibility into your product development process and actually realize more value for your users and also for your business? And Lily's an anthropologist and user researcher who'll be talking about disrupting sameness, which is a little bit awkward given that Lily and I both dressed pretty much the same today. Thanks, Lily. So maybe it's actually appropriate. So like I said, please tweet about it throughout the day. If you have any issues with being photographed, let me know, but we'll just take some photos and post them up on Twitter. And then after today's events, we'll have some time to kind of keep eating and talking and networking. All right, I might invite Bree up to the stage.
I think I might hold it. Okay, I'm going to try this. The first time I've used all this, so be patient. Thank you. Yes, I'm Bree Norton here. I work here at the DTA as the Accessibility and Inclusivity Lead. And I'm going to start with asking you a question. What does accessibility mean to you? And I would love some answers. Anyone would like to let me know? Yes? Ease of access. Ease of access, yep. Anyone else?
Inclusivity?
Yeah? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, making sure that your product, well, it's a whole range of things actually. Making sure that your product is going to meet the needs of all sorts of different kinds of users that are potentially going to cross whatever it is that you've produced.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Kind of making sure that they can get what they need from it.
Great. I have to write that one down. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, someone says easy, friendly, inviting, meaningful. I guess that's sort of things that someone is going to buy wants to feel.
Excellent. And I think we have one more over here. Sorry. That's right.
I think it's user friendly, and also like different user groups can use it, like totally different user groups.
Excellent. Now, and I think you've covered a lot of that there. And basically, it's not just about wheelchairs and screen readers. It's making sure accessibility is about optimizing the experience for everyone that's going to use your product. So before we get on to the why of the accessibility, and there's some links in this, and I'll share the slides at the end. Usually we share them beforehand, but I wasn't sure where to put them. So we will share them after this. But there's some links at the end to show you some examples of why it's really important to be considering your accessibility and lots of user needs. But also accessibility is about ensuring that anyone can use your information and consume the information in the way they desire. And that could be through a combination of text, images, video, desktop and mobile, through a combination of mouse, keyboard, and touch, and also on and off your site or the use of your product. So another reason why, the statistics tell us this. These are potential business reasons of why you should be considering accessibility at the whole stage of your process. There's statistics up here around the 1 in 5 Australians reported with a disability. 78.5% of people with disability have a physical condition. So a lot of this needs to be considered in how you actually access your users. The interesting statistics around this is that the people that have been hired in a labour force has not increased. So even though all the aspects and the statistics have increased in other areas, when it comes to actually hiring people, that hasn't increased. So we need to do something there to improve the hiring of people and give access to people in your workplace. Interestingly, the likelihood of getting a disability, that increases as you get older as well. So we're actually going to be seeing a lot more of that in the Australian market. And there's also the cultural and language diversity issues we need to think about. Whether they be language, people speaking different language and not speaking English as their first language. And what happens if the users do not understand your content? They're going to get misinformed. They could lead to safety concerns if they don't understand what you're saying. And it's also around what happens if users can't complete a transaction on your site or through your product process. They could not complete it and get stuck, and then there could be legal action. And it's all about usability, as people in the audience already mentioned. also very important. And if someone can explain that sign to me, please come and let me know later. So yeah, usability is very important. It's not just about the access to your content, it's also how they understand it. It's the context. So a little bit of history in Australia around accessibility. There's obviously the Disability Discrimination Act that saw the Sydney Olympic Games. And in Wikipedia, they actually say that's what started the W3C and the WCAG 2.0 movement. So WCAG 1.0 came out, and then WCAG 2.0, which is more semantic. And now we move to the Australian side of things with the Web Accessibility National Transition Strategy, which now is a part of number 9, the criteria of the Digital Service Standard. So what's the role of the Digital Transformation Agency? So the DTA is established to assist the government in guiding, overseeing and driving its digital and ICT transformation agendas. And it's not about building apps or websites, it's about changing government to focus on user needs. And that includes making sure that they're accessible. So these are some of the criteria for making simple, clear, fast government services that the DTA has in its kind of portfolio. It's helping build digital capability. It's developing the reusable products, and it goes all the way down to how we procure. And actually, as part of my role here, I'm helping in assisting with how you bring accessibility into the procurement process. And this all starts with the Digital Service Standard. Has anyone heard of this before? Yes, a few people, excellent. Which in itself is very much using a product methodology in the way it works. For the Digital Service Standard itself, the 3 items that really stand out around accessibility is number 1, meeting users' needs. Number 9, make it accessible. And number 10, test with your users. And that doesn't mean that the other items are not important. These are just the main ones that we focus on when we look at accessibility criteria. And Agile, very important part of the Digital Service Standard and very valuable. Agile allows teams to be more proactive and respond easily to change. Services get improved more frequently. Services are cheaper to launch. And building the accessibility aspect of this at each stage is also really important. A little bit more about the Agile delivery process here in making a minimal viable product and how the DTA works with the Digital Service Standard. And you can go to dta.gov.au if you want to see some more about that. They've just launched the new beta site. So please go and have a look at it. So the traditional service delivery model obviously looked at the users at the end, which we've switched and now bring it at the start and start incorporating it. And the lovely the item at the bottom, embed accessibility along the whole way, is the bit I've added. I think that's really, really important because you can get even some information around your users at the start that will actually identify a better product for people at the end. And that includes testing with users from all kinds of walks of life, different environments and different situations. So the benefits. We can see a few here. There's, we actually comply then with a lot of the legislative and frameworks that are in place. We can expand new audiences. You can improve usability for all those audiences, and there's greater potential for user conversion. And there's also a larger understanding of your content. That's a really important one too. So this is a slide with content from Jared Spool, who has actually identified specific strategic business benefits around understanding your content and design as you build your product or your service. And this is actually a really good quote. Content is what your user needs or wants right now. Design is how you deliver it. So you can't do one without the other. And he's actually worked out a scale of how you can assess whether you are meeting these, this kind of quote or this way of working by matching it to that strategic process there. So examples of making businesses making a difference is also how you hire So it's about the people and building up the skills. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here of where this has been done in the public arena. It's also about reducing cost by avoiding rework and development later in the process. And that includes also making sure accessibility is involved in that process. And I think our design system with the DTA is a good example of that. They've actually fed in and some test components that already meet accessibility criteria. That way you can just reuse it quite quickly. And saving time by considering ways to make the product better. And my first example here is Microsoft. And you've probably seen a lot of social and news going out about the way they're changing. I was recently at a conference, an accessibility conference, where they had a whole room for the 3 days of the conference talking about accessibility and how they've changed their culture in their environment, in their workplace. And I think this is about people for them. It's not just their users. That's very important. They want to make sure that they can get to all their users and their users can use all their products. But it's also about building the culture of inclusivity in their business. This is actually a customer support feedback form that is just for people with disability that get priority access when they buy a new product. eBay presented some interesting practical steps around how to embed accessibility along the way. They have actually identified an accessibility maturity model that they built into their process as they built their new site and built up their site. They've also developed core components similar to the design system idea of reuse of items already there. So they're not actually having to start from scratch all the time. So that actually demonstrates the costs and risks of why, how you can save costs and time and how that's important. And they've actually pulled in that maturity model to do an assessment to make sure that they can meet that. And finally, there's a cost. This was taken, Derek Featherstone, if you don't follow him, talked about this at this conference, and it was about the estimated cost of rework. So I don't know if many of you know, but a lot of the time we get asked to do an assessment of a site or a product at the end of the process and not brought in earlier. We can save a lot of money if you bring it in earlier. Have it along the way, have those tests done along the way, have people skill up and learning about accessibility and that criteria. Thinking about all those items along the way will mean that you actually save money. Very good business decision. So what do we need to do to make it accessible? And I might be speaking to a lot of people here that know about the WCAG criteria. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit more about the W3C's standard. So the WCAG criteria 2.1, it's acronyms PAW, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And the way these are broken up is that the criteria has 3 levels. You can meet A, AA, or AAA. For the Australian government, at the moment, it's AA. WCAG 2.0 AA is our level. But it would be an assessment of your site and your product to see who your users are, to see if you really should be trying to get to AAA standard, the conformance. So the 4 themes with perceivable: can people understand the layout of the website? Operable: can people use the website? Understandable: can people understand the content and functionality of the website or the product that you're making? And is it robust? Is it suitable for being used by assistive technologies and even different browsers? So for each of these, can people understand the layout? For this perceivable, this comes under your text alternatives. A lot of you will maybe understand what that means. It's having an image and providing some kind of explanation of what that image means. Audio and video alternatives. It's when you have a video and making sure that you've got captions or transcript for those that are using assistive technologies to also understand what that video is about. It's the content structure. It's actually being able to know that your layout it has HTML structure in it and a screen reader can navigate through it. And the use of color and color contrast and images of text. is actually a very important one. And that's one that's really quite noticeable now that with our growing population, senior population, sorry, that's actually quite an important one, the color contrast. So can people use it? It's operable. It's about using other access to your computer if you don't use a mouse. And this could be in a situation where you are only one-handed, you're holding a baby, okay? And you want to be able to just tap and quickly use something on the keyboard. You want to be able to have enough time to do something, and notified of time so that you're not logged out, so you're aware that you need to get something finished. It's about avoiding things moving too quickly or flashing to give people who are prone to getting seizures. And it's navigatable, so it actually allows you to move through the menus and the site so people can get to the content they need. Understandable means that its content readability is there. And we have a whole content strategy with the DTA that is really quite useful that could, to go through, and also give you some guides on how to structure your content and actually make accessible content for your product or service. It's also about predictability. So understanding when you do press a button, it's actually going to do what you expect it to do. Some people do code things with a button that might be a link when it actually should be an action, or vice versa. So there needs to be some understanding that it's consistent and that the user input assistance is there. So that is making sure, specifically around forms, that they understand what they need to complete. When something is robust, that means that assistive technologies can use it. That a lot of the mobile apps now, especially if they're Android or iOS, have that already set in place. A lot of the browsers already have that set in place. If you start customizing those things, you are not making it robust for assistive technologies to use it. There's some more criteria coming out from W3C and take us up to 2.1. There's 17 more criteria, and it's the way the standard works is that it's not another whole new standard. The standard is still there. And what they do is they add the criteria depending, and you know, the 2.0 came out quite a few years ago. There's new technologies, there's new things that we need to consider for accessibility. And that's what these new criteria are about. And we'll probably do another accessibility session here at DTA around 2.1 once it's actually an approved standard. The three main areas though that they're looking at in these 2.1 criteria is mobile, low vision, and cognitive. And I think when it comes to your product or service and accessibility and the benefits, it's testing with all your users, or, you know, as you go through each sprint, as you go through each bit of planning, think about all those users that will be using your product or service and testing with them. And that means sometimes using different assistive technologies, or with people with different languages. It's making sure you're getting to all your users, not just the same ones that come in and out all the time. And finally, what goes in hand with the accessibility is obviously some best practice around usability and inclusive design principles. There's a great link up here that I'll share with you called inclusivedesignprinciples.org by the Pacello Group. And they really explain the differences in a situation or an environment that you need to consider. Even if someone is vision impaired, their situation environment might be different. So it's actually thinking about everyone in all those different situations they might be in. And basically, accessibility is everyone's responsibility. There's a lot of people that say, oh, the devs will do it at the end. That's not true. Everyone should be responsible for this. And if you'd like to learn more, please come and chat to me. Keep in touch, and I'll be doing some more meetups around accessibility down the track. And thank you, Mariam, for having me. Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Bree? Anything that you'd like to, you know, you've tried applying accessibility in your products or services and you've found certain things challenging, or?
I'll pass this back to you. Thanks. Sorry, this might be really kind of specific and very technical, but just in terms of, because, you know, obviously we're following WCAG 2.0 AA compliance. But one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of the tools that we're utilizing for testing all of these different things for accessibility, for screen readers, all of those types of things, we're getting variable results between different particular products that we're utilizing. Do you have any specific recommendations as to which ones are better than others?
Not recommendations between the products, because they will pick up different things. And it's also how you, on the person that skill level that assesses it from the results that come out. It needs also manual testing. It needs the whole team to actually say, you know, is that in place? And then also testing that with users. So someone in that environment that maybe if it's a screen reader, process, if it's a keyboard access thing, then get someone in that environment to do that testing and you'll learn a lot more. It needs to go hand in hand. Those tools are great for some quick fixes and recommend people use them all the time, but it still needs ongoing user testing. Hope that's helped. Anyone else?
Well, this is something at All Homes we don't do very well. We haven't really thought about that much, I guess. But how do you think the best way to, because a lot of disabled people, in my experience, would not like the idea that they're, I guess, different to normal, fully able people. So how do you stop that sort of becoming a negative experience, do you think, for them?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's when you consider all your users, when you're doing testing, you invite all of them, including people with disability, or you know, your communities, that you just put it out there and say we're doing testing for this product, and then you'll get some of those people as well. So you're not identifying them as something specific, or some specific need. So that way you can gather it from everyone, and at the same time you're doing your own testing. If you're using this, you know, the screen readers or the automated tools, you know, you're using a variety of lots of different things that will give you some insight to what it's like. But as soon as you see those people do it in their own environment, you'll learn to understand, oh, that's how they use it. Okay, I'm going to learn a lot more. So I think it's about involving them with everything that you do.
Thanks.
And go, Lily. Yeah.
I'm just going to add, and I'll talk about this a little bit as well, that everyone deserves to be heard. And I think if you frame it in that way, it has more weight. Your request has more weight. So if you're, I'm going to talk quite a bit about, you know, different groups of users that we've done research with, and we've always approached it in a way that says, hey, you're in a situation that we don't necessarily know anything about, and we want to learn from you. Can you help us out? And when it's framed that way, people are generally very open. And
actually on that, the communities out there, they want to be a part of it. They want to be able to go into that workforce and use those products, or they want to go and use that. They want to buy that thing. You know, there are actually a lot of them who are very interested in being a part of that, and it's tapping into those kind of groups to help you with your testing as well. Thanks,
Hello.
Lily.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello.
Oh, random voice.
Yeah, sorry, it's Mira from Sydney.
Hi, Mira.
Hey, I just wanted to ask a question about, you know, you mentioned earlier about, you know, it's everyone's responsibility, accessibility, and getting involved in, you know, right from the beginning. How can some teams do that? Like, so can you give us some examples for, you know, the rest of the audience there in Canberra? How do you start doing that when typically it's left till the end?
That's a great question, and I had a discussion with teams a couple of weeks ago around this, and it's about building that empathy with the rest of the team early on. So even that first lot of user research that you're doing around your users, have everyone in that team there to observe and meet these people, meet all your users. Don't just tell them at the end that this is what's happening, and you'll start to build the empathy and get some understanding of what their experiences are like. I think that's the main way. It's also talking to each other around the steps at each sprint, what you're planning, What are we doing around this to make it accessible? Does anyone know this? How does anyone not know something? How can we all learn? So it's actually making it a conversation as you're going through the process. Does that help, Mira?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you.
Cool. So thanks, Bree, for that insightful talk about accessibility and the importance of it. I think the other thing to note is it's never too late to start, right? So whilst it gets more expensive the longer you leave it, as you start to chip away at it in your product, you'll continually build on that, that level of accessibility and improve your product's general usability for all users. So this is me being a little bit awkward. I'm probably going to cry in this, but you know, it's okay. So I found this little video that I saw a while back, and pretty much every time I see it, I get a little bit teary. But anyway, you don't all have to as well. But it essentially talks about a world without barriers. And it's something that Samsung have done. I think they trialed it in Turkey. And it was a way of enabling people who are hearing impaired to actually access their help center when they kind of call up. So when you kind of think about it, like I'd never thought about what that experience might be like. Like, what if you're using a product and you suddenly get stuck? Like, how do you get help when you can't really hear the person on the other end of the call? And so this is a little video of, it's an ad that they did to kind of, you know, publicize it, but it kind of just goes to the heart of why accessibility is important and why we need to think about it, not just in, you know, government service delivery, but in all products and services that we create. So hopefully this will work. I know. Yay. But I think for me, the thing, like I said, this really kind of opened up my eyes to, you know, accessibility has kind of been a bit of a forefront in my product development kind of experience, and mainly because of the digital service standard that Bree spoke about, and that it kind of constantly makes us think about it and look at it in everything that we do. But this kind of broadened my perspective a bit more to say, you know, it's actually someone's life who can now start to access services and products like we all do. I don't know if that's politically correct to say, sorry if it's not. But, you know, it just means that everyone has the same opportunities. And, you know, like Bree said, people want to participate. And so this is kind of just another way of doing that. So on that note, I'm going to awkwardly invite Lily up, who's dressed the same as me, to talk about disrupting sameness. So Lily is our, same. I don't know if it's going to work. What's going on? Okay, so Lily's, like I said, a user researcher and anthropologist, and has a wealth of experience around kind of diversity, inclusivity kind of research and going out to remote areas and accessing people. So she's just going to share all her awesome knowledge.
Thank you. Hi, cool. So as Mariam said, I'm user researcher and anthropologist here at DTA. And before I begin blabbing at you, I have a little experiment for us to do. So you've got 5 Post-it notes and a Sharpie on your seat. I want you to fill in the gaps for the following statements. The first one, slurping your soup loudly is. You can just do one answer per postie. Number 2, a seizure is caused by. You can totally guess if you don't know as well. 3, when you flick a light switch down, the light turns. Don't think too hard either. Whatever pops into your head. So many concerned faces. 4, avoiding eye contact during a conversation is. And 5, cricket is. Okay, we all good? Sweet. So today I want to talk about the value of challenging our cultural biases. Now, I'm sure in all of your product teams, you're already challenging all of the assumptions that you're making as you go along, which is good practice, right? But I want to take it one step further. And I want to look at what culture is, big question, I know, and also what cultural biases do to our thinking when we're working on a product. So I'll hopefully be demonstrating to you, let's see how we go, how we all unintentionally fill in the gaps in our knowledge with all of the shared experiences that we have in our team that might not be as much knowledge as we seem to think. So let's see how we go with the questions. The first one. And these are my initial thoughts. So slurping your soup loudly is rude. Did anyone think the same? Yeah, what else? Anything different? Noisy, annoying. Yeah, so all kind of similar to this? Fun, yeah. Cool, so in Japan, slurping your soup loudly is a sign of respect to the chef. A seizure is caused by erratic and disorganized electrical signals in your brain. Is that kind of along the same lines? Anyone has something? Pardon? Yeah, cool. Gave it a label. Yeah, similar things. Anything vastly different? Yeah, cool. Yeah, sweet. So for the Hmong in Lao, a seizure is caused by spirits intervening in human life. Next, we have when you flick a light switch down, the lights turn on. Does anyone have anything different? Off? Okay. In America, it's off. Cool. So one or the other. Anything different? One state to another. Nice. Very good. Number 4, avoiding eye contact during conversation maybe rude, a little bit awkward, maybe a sign that someone's really shy. Anything vastly different from that? Awkward, yeah. A sign of respect, yeah, in different cultures from around the world. And the last one, cricket is. This is my summary of cricket. This is how I understand it. A sport where one person pegs a really hard ball at another person who whacks it really far away, and other people in little white suits run to try and pick it up really fast. Similar? Anything vastly different? Boring. A sport, yeah. The best. Okay, cool. We're learning about each other. Good. In Zimbabwe, a local delicacy and an honor to be served. So crickets. That was a bit of a cheat, that one. Sorry. Okay, cool. So what's the point of all of this? How is this related to product development? Why I bring them up is I want to demonstrate what culture is and what it's doing to our thinking. So as Matthew Engel says, culture is a way, and this is quite conceptual, bear with me. Culture is a way of seeing things, a way of thinking. Culture is a way of making sense. Culture is what prevents some people from ever thinking that crickets could be classed as a food. Culture is also what fills our heads in the process of thinking in a particular way. Culture is what fills in the gaps when we don't know the answer. So, product development. Who are your users? Can you guys, maybe yell out, I'll repeat for the online audience. Who are your users for your products that you have? The public? All of the public? Potentially. Anyone who wants to travel? Cool. Who else? Developers? Anyone else have users? I hope. Journalists? Yeah, who else? Developers and designers in government? Cool. Is anyone unsure of who their users are? Because that might be a different conversation we need to have. Okay, cool. So we've got some examples. So when we are building a product, we constantly have our users in mind, or if we don't, then we definitely should. Now, sometimes we get to speak to those end users. We go out and we do research, and other times even though we know we probably shouldn't, we use our imaginations to think about what a user might be and what their life might be. We fill in the gaps like we did with the statements at the beginning with culture, with all that we know. But your product statements or your product questions might be more along the lines of users from regional towns want X, Y, and Z. Users who have children want this, or users who have different physical abilities need gap. Now you might be thinking, oh, we have a really diverse team, so, we're fine. We can draw from lots of different knowledge. And you might be right. There's people in your team likely from different parts of Australia, often from different places around the world. In Australia, we're very lucky to be very multicultural. And you'll likely have people in your team with different religious backgrounds, spiritual beliefs, hobbies, skills, demeanors, the whole gamut. However, chances are that in your team, there are some pretty strong similarities, maybe not on the surface level, but in how you think. The fact that we all work, well, let's put yourself in your product team position. So with the people around you, you all work in the same place. And this is an indicator that you might actually have, shared values, shared ambitions, shared interests. The fact that you're all employed in a certain pay bracket that far exceeds many people from around Australia means that you likely had a similar trajectory with your education and with working in a similar industry. The fact that you spend at least 8 hours a day all together in the same place, talking about the same thing with the same people, working on the same problem, means that you probably have a few similar thinking patterns. Maybe not at first. When someone new joins the team, it's so fresh. They come with fresh eyes, and we always go, oh, check out the product, tell us what you think. Great process. But over time, that person is going to learn about the culture of your team and the culture of the organization. Now, even if you have a really diverse group of people, how big is a product team? 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people. Relying on those 10 brains to think up diverse ideas and solutions, or think up diverse imaginary end users, means you're literally relying on 10 brains. And I know we're all special snowflakes, but we only have a certain amount of knowledge, right? And that is 10 out of however many million people live in the country. It's a small pool. Now, Sameness is not a bad thing. Obviously, Mariam and I addressed the same today. Sameness is not a bad thing. It helps us work together well, right? We're not having to explain every single cultural reference or use of slang in our team. We're not having to reframe our understanding of the world or the technology we use, our expectations of government or services of each other. We're efficient, and hopefully most of the time we're on the same page. And we're pretty chuffed with ourselves when we have a similar thought or we land on the same idea. However, within that group, despite all of the diversity that exists among you, there are often no distinctly different voices. And this, I believe, and this is all a theory, but I believe this is what blocks us from being truly creative in how we think about what our product might be. It's like, okay, I think about it this way. It's like we've all got glasses on and they're all shaded pink. Now my pink glasses might be sparkly. Bree, yours might have dots on them. Mariam, yours might have stripes. Krista, yours might have, you know, special pink fluffy flowers out the side or something. But essentially they're all pink, right? We're looking at the problem with very similar lenses on. There we are, all in our pink. Whoa, they got really fat. Okay. And eating lots of food. Now, if you think about your end users and think about all of the different lives they're living, you can begin to think that they are different colors. They're looking at your product with different colored lenses on. And this, when you see all of the different colors, makes you realize just how narrow your own personal experiences are. They're wonderful, but they're quite narrow. Just think about how many end users' lives you can't even imagine because you don't even know that that reality exists. Australia is a big place. It's a multicultural place. It's a diverse place. If your end users, let alone if we've got international products in the room, but if your end users come from all over Australia, then you've got a whole lot of people to be thinking about. And when you do think about these people, when you speak to them, when you learn from them, you're tapping into all of their creativity, all of their life experiences. You can broaden your thinking about where your product may end up in the end. Okay, so let's go back to that. How many people have gone out and done research for their product? Cool, lots of people, awesome. How many have had an experience where you kind of, someone says something or does something that makes you see your product in a different light? Couple, does anyone want to share an example? Yeah, do we have a mic? Cool.
My name's Rob Wills from IP Australia. We recently delivered a search system for trademark users, and one of our user groups was startups. And so one of the assumptions we had was that they were cost sensitive. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, one of the things that we really focused them in on was how we get the information so they can make choices about where they spend their money. And when we started talking to people who are involved in the startup community, we realized that getting relatively small amounts of money, by that I mean $10,000, yep, was quite easy for them to do. What they were was time poor. And so that was a revelation for us. So they didn't need to get cheap information. What they needed was quick information.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Anyone else want to share? Mariam. Why not? Wearing the same clothes.
Why not? I think for me, one of the main things, and it kind of comes back to the accessibility thing, was that one of our products, we were putting a whole lot of effort into the color contrast kind of side of things. And I happened to be buying a cup of coffee at a coffee shop, and I threw up our product on my phone just to show this person who I discovered was colorblind by talking about the chalk colors on the board. And as soon as I showed it to him, within like a few seconds, the poor guy had to kind of look away and just could not stare at the screen because of the impact it had. And it turned out the colors weren't contrasting enough. And what was resulting was it was almost like burning into his retinas and all the colors were vibrating on the screen. Oh, wow. And so that for me was a real kind of wake up in terms of like the impact that that could have on someone and needing to put more effort into that side of the product.
Yeah, nice, nice. Anyone else? You're good? Cool. So I'm going to share a few examples as well. So I worked on a product here that was essentially trying to build an online identity proofing system. As federal government, our users were literally the whole of Australia. As an anthropologist, that's really exciting and I love it. But as Bree said before, we were very lucky in that our team understood that it was our responsibility as a whole, not just on the user researcher, but as a whole, to go wide with our research and talk to as many people from all walks of life as possible in order to make a product that was actually going to going to work for everyone. I will say that that product is still under development. So yeah, you wouldn't have seen it yet. Cool. And this is where, so I've got 3 kind of groups of people here that we actually specifically went out to speak to. And this is kind of coming back to the question of how do you do that without calling someone out as different? Now, if you understand that this is one, and you kind of communicate that this is one piece of research in a whole range of different research, then it becomes that one person's voice or that group of people's voice is important to understand in the whole perspective, and it's a whole different conversation. Okay, so for the transgender individuals we spoke to, so we decided to speak to or recruit for transgender individuals because we were building a system that it's pretty much reliant on the fact that your identity documents match. Now, someone who's going through a transition obviously might be in a situation where the documents don't match. They might have been born a male and they've transitioned into a female and might have, so their birth certificate and their current driver's license might be different, let alone the names. So we're interested in the discrepancies in documents and also the costs of getting all of your documents to match up, to get documents reissued. What is that, and is it prohibitive? Now, we went into this also just wanting to learn. None of us in our team were transgender. We didn't have transgender family or friends. And so we wanted to go and learn. We wanted to hear about a life experience that we didn't have exposure to. So we worked with a local advocacy group in Sydney, and they helped us basically put the word out that we're interested to hear people's stories, and people opted in. So we got people from Sydney and Melbourne and people from all kind of different social situations as well. So it was a really good spread. Now, what we learned was something, I mean, we learned about the documents and the costs and all of that, but what kind of sprung out of this research was something that we hadn't thought about at all in our service design. And it was the fact that going into a service centre to get support for a government service, or any service for that matter, might be inaccessible, not because of location or a physical constraint. You know, these people were not 8 hours away from their local Centrelink, but rather because of an emotional burden or a psychological weightedness. Is that a word? It is now. Weightedness that is kind of tied into their life. So a number of the people we spoke to spoke about how they hadn't accessed government services that they wanted to access or that they were allowed to access, because going into a service centre and speaking to the person across the counter who they know nothing about and having to explain why their documents don't match up was so personal, so intimate. They didn't know how that person was going to react, let alone the 5 people in the line behind them. They didn't know what kind of prejudice they held. And so for them, it was just too anxiety producing. And this wasn't one individual. This was a number of people who said that they were in that situation, or they had to take family or friends in with them to have that emotional support. Now, this totally kind of kicked us in the guts, because as Miriam said before, this is someone's life, right? We're not kind of counting whoever gets to the end of the service. Like, yeah, that's great, but this is someone's actual life. And what we'd realized we had done is we'd kind of filled in those gaps where there was dropout points. We had unintentionally told ourselves that it was okay that some people were going to have to go in, so that's fine, without actually questioning what the experience of going into a service centre might mean for someone. For the vulnerable and at-risk young people, we worked with a charity who runs a whole lot of schools and programs for kids who range from kind of being, you know, sleeping rough, literally on the streets, to being out of mainstream schooling and into one of their schools for a whole range of reasons. And so we went to one of the schools and we were able to speak to some of these kids. They range from about 14 to 17 years old. And we were really interested again in what documents do they have access to? Do they have driver's licenses? Do you have a driver's license if you don't have, you know, if you're not staying at home and you don't have an income? What about technology? Do they have smartphones or not? What about levels of education? Some of these kids had literally run away from home when they were 8 and spent the 4 years after that sleeping on the streets. So going to school every day was not on their top priority, right? So what happens when someone has had gaps in their education, how do they manage getting through a government process? Now, what we found in this, again, was totally kind of left of field. So this one was actually, this social and cultural assumption that we had was so embedded in all of us that we didn't even call it out before we went in. We didn't know it existed. So going through this flow that we have, in the process, you have to basically take a photo of yourself with your laptop or your phone, and that photo gets compared to one of your photo ID documents, so your let's say your driver's license. In the flow, basically, they landed on that page and the camera turned on. And we'd had kind of older people that we'd interviewed land on that page and go, oh gosh, you know, when you like open your phone and it's the wrong way and you get the whole, you know, up the nostril kind of view. It was like that for some people. They really didn't like it. But we all kind of went, oh, you know, they're a bit older, you know, they'll get used to it. It wasn't kind of traumatizing for them. It was just a bit of a shock. With these kids, we landed on that page and they were so troubled by it. And there was a number of times, actually, after it happened probably twice, I started saying, I'm going to show you this part, and not letting them do it themselves, because the response was so troubling to see. And we kind of went, oh, shit, what's all that? Sorry, what's all that about? Sorry, Wald. What's all that about? And we kind of, you know, nutted it out afterwards and spoke to their teachers and their caseworkers and found out that some of these kids, their self-esteem was so low that they avoided seeing themselves in mirrors or in reflections. They would never take a photo of themselves. They won't be in a group photo. And so for them, they're sitting there doing a government application and it makes you take a selfie and you haven't seen your own reflection in months or years or whatever it is, for all of the complex reasons behind that. How confronting. So for us, it was a massive lesson. And then we kind of thought, okay, maybe those older people who weren't so, or those different people who weren't so comfortable with the camera, maybe we should actually be thinking about how we can improve this. So contrary to, you know, what we thought was good design, where we were trying to get as few clicks as possible, get you straight to the end, we actually ended up editing 3 different pages before that screen came up. 3 or 4 clicks, because we wanted to slow people down. They were racing through and we wanted to slow them down so they didn't get that shock. And so for the people who didn't want it to happen, it didn't happen. You know, it was kind of all about choice for them. So that was a really good learning, and really kind of made us question where we were using assumptions about people's behavior that we weren't even aware of. Like the ones that you can call out, they're easy. You can go and validate those. The ones that you're not aware of are the dangerous ones. And finally, remote NT and WA communities. So I went out with another researcher for 2 weeks and we kind of piggybacked off DHS. They go out and service the communities out there. And we went out for 2 weeks. Again, we were interested in what documents people had. You know, they were living on Indigenous land, and so you don't need a driver's license on Indigenous land. So how do they prove who they are to get the government services that they need? We're also interested in technology. We knew that people shared technology, but we didn't know how or what that even looked like. And also we'd been told that people in these communities, for some of them, English was their 4th or 5th language. So heaps of really big questions, and none of us were willing to fill in those gaps without actually being out there. And it's a tough gig getting out there. It's, you know, we drove a day and a half west of Alice Springs. Like we were in the middle of nowhere. So it was a rare piece of research that was able to be done, but it's a super important one. And what we learned and what we saw was that there was a community approach to accessing government service out there. So one individual might not be able to access a service on their own for a whole, again, I keep saying a whole range of reasons, but there are so many reasons in all of these cases. And they might, you know, spend a day and a half bouncing between different service providers or people within their family or friend group to help them get to that service. Now, that's a whole different model to us going and waiting in Centrelink for an hour or 2 or 4 to get the service that we need. We also saw how people were sharing technology and saw, you know, some of the genius ways they were and some of the challenges that popped out of that, and also how they were navigating English government services, not necessarily with English, especially reading and writing. It taught us a lot, and it really helped inform. I think I just turned the mic off. Oh, that's better. Has that been on? Okay. Sorry. Okay. But it also helped us really inform our policy piece. So along our product design for this identity system, there's a huge policy piece, and so it opened up a whole lot of questions for the policy crew. And again, this is something that's continuing. Big juicy piece of research. So before I kind of wrap up, I do want to talk about recruitment because it's an interesting one. So with all of these groups, and look, we spoke to close to 600 people when I was on that project. So it was a lot of people from all over Australia. But what we really tried to do was use existing organisations that understand the specificity of the lived experience of people who are in a certain social group. And use their expert knowledge in order to do research in a respectful way, in an appropriate way. We as researchers and everyone here as a part of product teams are wholly responsible for the well-being of our research participants. They're sharing their personal stories and their personal experiences so we can make our products better. Like, that's a pretty weird situation to be in, right? And so we need to be going into this understanding that it is an absolute privilege that people are sharing their stories with us. Doing research with people who aren't on the recruitment books is wonderful, but they also might be from different marginalised or vulnerable groups within society. So this is, you have to approach it in an appropriate way, but it's also really important that we do it, A, because it makes more inclusive products as a whole, but B, like we said before, those people don't necessarily get asked to share their opinions and their experiences very often. And they're not the people popping in on the recruitment books and, the repeat offenders that you see every 6 weeks. So it's really important that we have those conversations and learn from them. So what's the moral of the story? Where's my clicker? The 4 Bs. I made this up. I don't think that's a thing, but it is now. So talking to people who are vastly different to yourself and to your team members will help you broaden your thinking. They'll help you think about your product in a totally different way. They might say just one thing out of an hour interview that makes you go, huh? And then that opens up discussions and brainstorming sessions and design jams that you might not have had if you hadn't had that conversation. There might not be 80% of your target user group, but that's okay because they're still potential customers and their needs and their interests are just as valid as someone else's. Ultimately, this type of research is about harnessing different ways of thinking to break through those invisible cultural biases that we all have, that shape how we think, how we act, and how we make decisions. It's about learning from other people to help you be creative, to have those design jams on those new things that came up and build more inclusive products that take into account true diversity, not this tick box stuff. Let's actually think about the diversity of human life. And it's about understanding that there's no one way of being in this world, and that's just a cool thing to be exposed to. So, embrace sameness. I know the whole title is Disrupting Sameness, but just embrace it because it is good for us, and you can wear matchy-matchy with your boss. So embrace sameness, but also seek out and learn from difference because ultimately you will build a better product. And that's it. Any questions?
We want to hear from you.
I guess cost is something that it is a factor. I don't see
the cost.
The website better, for example, the DTE in another language.
Sorry, Canberra, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can we repeat that?
Sorry. What I can see is that the statement is great, but the cost is a factor. Mm-hmm. Developing standards for the DTA, for example, is just in English. So even though we are an English society, but as you said, there is a potential consumer there that maybe is not fully English. No?
Yeah, and that's important. And I would say, back to Bree's comment that if you do this from the beginning, then it's ultimately just in the way that you work. So you're not trying to race out and grab a few people who think differently at the end and having to spend bucket loads of money getting places to do that. but also that maybe, yes, I agree that this is like ideal world, but there are ways that you can learn from people who have barriers that you may not be able to fix. But in learning about those barriers, there's an awareness that will change the way that you are designing your product. And I think that's ultimately what we should be aiming to do. It's kind of an education piece, you know, and we can't fix everything for everyone. You know, it's kind of a reality, but we should be trying. Anyone else?
Following on that, actually, in your view, what would be a good ratio for how much costs and, well, the percentage essentially of a typical project? How much should we allocate to do diversity and user research?
Ooh, I wouldn't have a clue. I've never had to make that call. I just have to convince someone to give me money. I actually, does anyone know?
There's a time frame allocated in the standard for discovery, and the idea is that you should be spending more of that, and the funding should be on discovery, and at the end of discovery you make the decision to go into alpha. So that actually helps you determine what more money you need. So you're not looking at it at the whole project. The way the digital service standard works is you kind of work out what funding you're planning for funding in that discovery period as well. You can't put a set number on it, I don't think, but it depends on the product or the service. But considering that your discovery, I'm going to do this amount of work, and the outcome of this will either be we go ahead or we don't. And as part of that, what's my budgeting? Does that help?
I think there's another element to it as well. So what I tend to do in my product is that I'll work with the researcher to kind of come up with a bit of a plan. So, you know, over the alpha phase or over the beta phase, you know, how much research do we expect to do each sprint? And we have a bit of an idea, like Lily said, when you work with established organizations to kind of help you recruit users who meet a particular type of brief, there's a certain cost involved in that. Hypothetically, I won't necessarily say any particular amounts because everyone kind of varies, but there's a particular cost involved in them finding the users for you, and you kind of pay them an incentive to participate and give you an hour of their time. And so based on that, generally what I tend to do is when I work with my researcher to make up that plan, I just work out what that cost is. You know, we'll have 20 interviews, it costs $10 an interview, therefore we're going to need this much for it, and we might put a bit extra if we need to travel out to users in like particular different states and things like that. So that's how we tend to work it out.
Hi, it's Mary here. Just to snowball off of that, Mariam, I think you've pretty much covered everything I was going to say. But just to add a little bit more, I think you can, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you sprinkle a little bit of discovery throughout whichever stage you're at. So you're always doing research. So decide how many, you know, if you're speaking to users in every sprint, just give it a magic number of how many users you're going to speak to in every sprint, and cost it for the worst case scenario. So you might want to speak to 10 people, but you end up speaking to 6. So it's to always cost out a little bit more. I know, like when Lily and I were working on identity, I had to put a figure together for alpha after discovery, and then, you know, a figure together for beta after alpha. And it was really difficult to give it a number. So I scoped higher, and then there was budget basically and room to maneuver if you wanted to go to like Northern Territory and do some of the diverse research that we did.
Does that help at all? I know it's kind of fluffy. It's difficult because.
Yep. Thank you for all the answers. I'll bring you a bit more into something concrete. So yes, I'm very well aware of DSS. One of the challenges we have in our organization is that because of the procurement processes, we need to know about, at the very least, the size of the beast in advance. And yes, we are aware that during discovery, we will do much more discovery that will include, obviously, user research. But through one of the DSS assessment that we had, the feedback was that we should have engaged more users. And that has cost implication. That is very, very difficult to know in advance. And so I think that some of the practicality of it is that when we do the DSS assessment, there needs to be some more instruction around what it really means. So if, for example, we take a different topic like testing or analysis, it might not be perfect, but we kind of know the percentage of 15 to 20% or 30% analysis. If we can come up with some concrete evidence of looking at what actually we have done, how much we actually used of the overall budget through discovery, then we can get some actual observation and from it conclude what would be a good ratio. Because I think that will enable us to then go to procurement with much more information in hand.
Yeah, and it makes that discussion a lot easier if you have evidence to say, yeah, this percent. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, maybe something we need to tuck under our little wings.
Just on that, it's Noni here from Sydney. I was just going to say that the way we've scoped projects in the past has not just been that discovery takes a portion of your budget, it's that you budget for discovery and then you have a full budget for alpha when you decide what alpha needs to be from discovery. So rather than saying 25% of the budget goes for discovery, actually saying this is the budget for the project is discovery, and then the project is alpha, etc.
But you have to have buy-in, right, for that to fly as well. And that's part of the problem. And, you know, at DT, I think we're very lucky because we've got buy-in, but it's a big challenge. Yeah, fair. We need to share more stories, get convincing. Yeah, evidence.
Any other questions?
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. Thank you. Thanks, Lily. That was awesome. So if you want to hit Lily up at all, you've got any kind of burning questions, obviously you can chat after this, but also just at Lily Ainsworth on Twitter. So that's kind of the end of our chats for today around World Product Day. Thank you all so much for coming. I know that it was kind of not a huge amount of notice before this meetup, but hopefully we'll kind of get that a little bit more regular up on meetup.com. I've left you all a little dot on your seat. If you wouldn't mind, just to help us kind of get a bit more understanding of the makeup of our little community here, if we could just put some dots on where you're from, so public sector versus private sector, and we'd love you to leave some feedback, you know, talks that you're keen to hear about. If you want to talk at a meetup, come hit myself or Danny up and just kind of give us your details so we can tee that up for future meetup events. Also, because we are kicking off World Product Day and they've asked each product tank to do this, I was hoping that you might be keen to participate in a little video. So we just kind of do a sort of happy World Product Day from Product Tank Canberra, and we'll post it, and they're going to do it for every city, and so that all 90 odd cities kind of have a little video. If you don't want to be on the video, it's okay, but I'd be really sad if it's just me on my own. I mean, I'll just boomerang it, so it'll just be me over and over again, but you know. So if you guys are happy to do that, maybe we'll kind of do that. And then there's heaps of food and donuts and fruit left, so please help yourself mingle, and thank you again for coming along today. Yay.
Do we have donuts in Sydney?
Sure, if you just walk out of the building, just down the road, pretty sure Woolworths sells a couple of cinnamon donuts or something. Sorry, Sydney. Maybe, if they're still around. Bye, Sydney.
Bye, thank you, everyone.
Now, before everybody runs away, yeah, do it on the stage. Thanks, Lily.
We just have to be hidden from each other's view.
You reckon? It depends. Yeah, it depends. Will we have enough? We can just move down. Yeah, well, over the top of the video? Yeah. All right. Are you guys coming? Come on. Come on. Come on, everyone. Little community. Sorry.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy World Product Day! I'm gonna watch it. Sorry. Otherwise, we gotta watch it. Yeah, we just got the hat too. So yeah, it's good. Maybe one more.